You're standing outside at the end of an ordinary day, and the light is on the backs of your hands. Look at it. Not at the sky, not yet. Just at your hands, at the warm orange sitting in the small hairs on your knuckles, at the way the light finds the edge of your thumbnail and stops. That light came off a surface, an actual surface, a boundary you could point to, about 93 million miles from where your feet are. It is called the photosphere, and it is the place where the sun stops being opaque and starts being sky. It is the last thing the light touches before it spends 8 minutes crossing empty space to land on your skin. It is a wall. That is the part that takes a moment to settle. You have been taught to imagine the sun as a ball of gas with no real edge, and in a technical sense that is fair. But what you are feeling right now is a shell, a physical boundary with a location, and that boundary is scheduled to move. Not tonight. Not in your life or your children's lives, or in the whole run of anything that could reasonably be called human. But in something like 5 billion years, when the sun has finished burning the hydrogen in its core, that boundary begins to travel outward. It swells. It grows until it reaches roughly the distance you're standing at right now. It swallows Mercury. It swallows Venus. Those are not metaphors. Those are two rocky worlds, currently in orbit, currently there, that go inside the wall and do not come out. Stay with me and let the day around you go strange. Because the thing about that swelling is that nobody experiences it as an event. This is what people get wrong when they picture it. They imagine a night, a bad night, a red sky, and a scream. But it takes hundreds of millions of years. There is no morning where somebody wakes up and says, "So it has started." There is only a slow arithmetic that no single generation is equipped to notice. Imagine standing here, on this same patch of ground, in that era. The sun comes up. It goes down. It does that for a long time, and across spans so wide that entire species would rise and vanish inside them, the disk in the sky gets a little wider. A little. Your grandmother's sunsets were fractionally smaller than yours, and nobody has instruments patient enough to care. The change is real, and the change is invisible, both at once, and this is the exact texture of the ending you're walking into. The red giant's light climbs the sky, the way floodwater climbs a window from the inside. Slow enough that no single day looks like the day it happened. Slow enough that the disaster has no anniversary. And then, eventually geologically, the disk stops being a disk. Picture it. You're outside, and the thing overhead is not a coin anymore. It has no rim you can take in at a glance. It is a field, an arc of dull red-orange that fills a quarter of the sky, and then a third, and then half of it. And it has stopped setting in any way that means anything. It sinks, and part of it is still up. It hangs on the horizon like a lid that will not close. The dark comes in a band along the edge of the world, and the rest is that low, sullen furnace red, and there is no hour of the day that is not lit. It is the sun as a coal held closer and closer to your face, not brighter. That is the counterintuitive part. Cooler on the surface, redder, gentler in colour, and enormous, and you feel it before you would ever see it move. But you would not be there. That is the honest shape of this, and it needs saying plainly before the picture gets too romantic. Because the wall arrives last. The killing arrives early. Long before anything gets engulfed, long before the disk becomes an arc, the oceans go. Not dramatically. They go the way a pot goes when the heat is left on, and everyone is in the other room. The water gets warmer. The warmer water throws more vapour up into the air. The vapour holds the heat in. The held heat warms the water. There is nothing in that loop that argues back. And somewhere in there, the last of the ocean stops being ocean and becomes weather. What you would stand in, if you could stand in it, is a permanent white haze. Steam. Not clouds, not the kind that move and break and let a blue afternoon through, but a lid of vapour with no edges, glowing that furnace colour from above, and no rain that ever reaches the ground because the ground is far too hot to let it land. The atmosphere thins from the top as the heat strips it away into space. Then it is rock, just rock, bare and lit red, with the shapes of seabeds still in it, sterile, dry, and absolutely quiet. Centuries of that, then hundreds of millions of years more of that. And only then maybe the wall. So here's the thing that gets lost in every clean telling of this story. Earth surviving and anyone being here to see it are two completely separate questions, and only one of them is contested. The contested one is fun, in the way that a coin flip nobody can call is fun. Rise up out of the scene for a second and look at it from above, at the whole system, the swollen sun and the dead rock going around it. Two forces are pulling in different directions, and scientists have been arguing about which one wins. On one side, drag. The sun's outer atmosphere has puffed out toward where Earth's orbit is, and moving through that, even that thin stuff costs you. Tides pull too. The bulge the planet raises on that huge slow star tugs backward, and orbits do not tolerate being tugged backward. In the older models, that is the whole story. Earth spirals in. It touches the wall. It ablates. It is dragged down. It becomes a slightly heavier sun and nothing else. On the other side, weight loss. A dying star does not keep all of itself. It sheds mass, throws it off in a slow wind, and as the sun gets lighter, its grip on everything around it loosens. Every orbit widens. Earth drifts outward. And in newer modelling, work done in the last few years by researchers in Belgium and in France, the tidal drag turns out to be weaker than people had assumed, and the mass loss turns out to be enough, and Earth slips out ahead of the wall, not saved, just further away. A cinder in a wider ring, going around and around at a distance that no longer means anything. Nobody can say for sure which of those actually happens. That is not a dodge. It is genuinely two credible pieces of arithmetic pointing at each other across a 5 billion year gap. And the difference between them is whether this specific rock, the one under your back right now, has a grave or just an afterlife. I find that one hard to put down, that the question is not whether we end, it is whether the ground itself gets to keep going without us, in the dark, in a slightly larger circle, carrying our fossils and our concrete and our sunk ships around a fire that no longer has any use for them. And then the fire goes out too, because the wall does not last. That is the thing about the red giant phase. It is enormous and it is brief by the standards of a star, and at the end of it the sun cannot hold its outer layers anymore. It lets them go. They drift off in shells, lit up for a while, a coloured ring of gas that anything watching from a few light years out would find genuinely beautiful. And then those shells thin and cool and stop being anything. What is left in the middle is small. Here's what I want you to hold. The thing that swallowed 2 planets, the wall that filled half your sky, collapses down into an object about the size of the Earth. That is it. The whole remaining core of the sun, packed into a sphere you could fly around in a day at the speed of a jet, if a jet could exist near it, which it could not. The density is where it stops being a number and starts being a feeling. A teaspoon of that material weighs tons. Take a spoon out of your kitchen drawer, the one you use for sugar. Fill it. You could not lift it. No arrangement of your body, no leverage, no rope and pulley you could improvise would raise that spoon off the counter. It would go through the counter. It would go through the floor. It would keep going, because there is nothing in an ordinary house or an ordinary planet's crust that is built to argue with matter squeezed like that. That is a white dwarf. That is what your sun becomes. And it is still there in the sky. That is the detail that gets me. It does not vanish. It sits where the sun used to sit, a small hot ember, faintly warm, cooling on a schedule so slow it makes the red giant era look like a sneeze. If Earth is still around in its wide dead ring, That ember is what rises over the boiled seabeds, a point of light, not enough to warm anything, just enough to see by if there were eyes, which there are not. An Earth-sized coal in a sky nobody is under. So think about what you have just watched, because I want to say the thing this whole night is actually about, and this is where it turns. You have probably run into the argument. It is the one everybody has, the one that shows up in every version of this conversation, and it goes like this. Does the universe end in fire, or does it end in ice? Does everything eventually fall back together and burn? One enormous reversal, everything that ever was compressed back into a single point of heat? Or does it just spread out, cool off, thin down, dim toward nothing forever, cold and quiet and slow? Fire or ice? Pick one. People have been picking one for 100 years. And I do not think either side is wrong exactly. I think both sides are answering a question that no observer will ever be around to have. Because the universe does not need to physically end for it to be over. It only needs to leave. Look at what actually happened in the scene you just stood in. The Earth was not destroyed on any particular night. It was left. The heat came first, then the silence, then a very long stretch of a real planet going around a real star with the whole story already finished. No witness, no record, nothing to notice that the lights had changed. The ending was not the wall. The ending was the emptying. The wall showed up hundreds of millions of years after the last thing that could have flinched. And that pattern, that gap, that awful lag between when the meaning stops and when the physics stops, does not just happen to Earth. It happens everywhere. Staggered, private. One pocket of matter at a time. Every place that ever holds anything that can look up goes through its own emptying, and none of them are on the same night. There is no shared apocalypse. There is no moment where it all goes together and something, somewhere, gets to say, well, that was it. There is only a sky that has less in it than it used to, then less, then nothing. That is the third thing, the one that sits underneath fire and ice, and once you see it, you cannot go back to the coin flip. The real ending is not an event. It is an absence that arrives so gradually that no version of you would be able to name the day it started, exactly like the disk in the sky that widened by nothing at all across every single generation that watched it. The universe does not slam shut. It empties out, and the emptying does not care which physical ending is waiting at the bottom of it, because everything that could have been there to care went quiet a very long time before. You're lying there now with your hands still warm, and it does not feel like a thing in progress. That is the whole trick of it. The sun outside your window is the same sun. Not a metaphor for it, not a stand-in, the actual object, already burning through the fuel that puts it on this schedule. Everything I have just walked you through is not a possibility we are entertaining. It is on the calendar. The date has a number. It is the one ending in all of this that does not depend on which theory turns out to be true, and the light it is throwing off is the light you have been reading by your whole life. Nobody can tell you exactly what the last warm evening on this planet feels like. Perhaps it is not warm. Perhaps it is just very bright and very still, and someone or something is standing outside at the end of an ordinary day with the light on the backs of its hands, not knowing that the arithmetic has already turned, the way you do not know, the way nobody standing under a widening sun ever could. But the ember is not the story. The ember is only the first one, the nearest one, the one with a date. Out past it, past the shells of gas thinning into nothing, past the wide, dead orbit of a rock with our fingerprint still on it, the rest of the sky is doing the same thing on its own clock, slower, redder, emptier. And there is light out there still, for a very long time, though not the kind you would recognize and not from anything you could name tonight. So you let the ember cool behind you, and you go looking for whatever light is left. So you let the ember cool behind you, and you go looking for whatever light is left. You drift out, not fast, There is no fast, not at this scale, and anyway you're past hurry now. The white husk that used to be your sun shrinks behind you until it is one more faint point among points, and you find that you cannot pick it out anymore. That surprises you. You expected to be able to. You expected the thing that made every morning of your life to hold some kind of mark on the sky, some brightness that said, this one, this was yours. It does not. It looks like all the others, and the others are changing. You notice it first the way you notice a room getting dark while you're reading in it. Not as an event. As a slow condition you have somehow been inside of for a while. The blues go first. The hot showy stars, the ones that burn like a spilled match. The ones that made all the pictures you ever saw of space look violent and gorgeous. Those are already gone, and they went so early in this story that you almost missed them. Then the yellows, then the oranges. The sky's not going black. That is the thing you are not ready for. The sky is going red. Red the way coals go in a grate hours after the last log was fed. Still there. Still warm if you put your hand near, giving nothing back. So you go looking for the light, and you find it in the stars nobody ever points at. Nobody named these. Nobody built a myth around them. They do not make it into the songs, and you cannot see a single one of them from a backyard on Earth without help. They are the red dwarfs, and out here, past the ashes, you understand something that the sky you grew up under never told you. They are most of everything. Roughly 7 out of every 10 stars that exist, and they were always 7 out of 10, even on the clearest night of your life, even when you were lying on your back in the grass counting the bright ones. You were counting the exceptions. The rule was invisible the whole time, and the rule is patient in a way the exceptions never were. Your sun got about 10 billion years. That is the whole allowance, and you already watched it spend the last of it. A red dwarf burns so slowly, so stingily, that it can hold on for something like 10 trillion. Say the number once and then let it go. You do not need to carry it. You only need the shape of it, which is this. The universe is 13.8 billion years old right now, tonight, with you in it. And that is not even 1% of the way into a red dwarf's life. Sit inside that for a second, because it does something strange to the floor under you. Everything you have ever called ancient is early. The oldest rock you could hold in your hand. The oldest light in the deepest telescope image anyone ever made. The word primordial, the word eons, the word ago as you have always meant it. All of it is the first minute. You were not born late in the story. You were born so early that the story has barely cleared its throat, and the thing you called cosmic history is a sliver of the opening. So you keep drifting, and you watch the sky do the only thing it has left to do. It stops making anything new. You can almost see it happen if you let the time run soft. Galaxies are engines that turn cold gas into stars, and the gas is not infinite. It gets used. It gets locked up inside husks that will never give it back. Somewhere out along the way, between 1 trillion and 100 trillion years, the last collapse happens somewhere. The last knot of hydrogen falls in on itself and lights, and nothing in the universe marks the occasion. There is no final star with a name. There is just a sky that is no longer replacing what it loses, and this is where it turns for you, because you realize you are watching a thing you have no word for, not a death, a tapering. The lights going out is easy to picture. The lights not being replaced is harder, and it is worse, and it is quieter. Every galaxy you pass is a city where the last house was built a long time ago and nobody noticed, and now it is only the old buildings standing further and further apart as the roads between them stretch. The red points thin. They spread. The dark between them gets wider every time you look, and you stop being able to tell whether the sky's dimming or simply emptying, and it might not matter, because from where you float the two feel identical. And then one of them does something you were not warned about. It flares blue. You have no idea what to do with this. Everything you learned about stars said they redden as they end, swell, cool, go the colour of rust and old fire. That is what your sun did. That is what the pictures showed. But a red dwarf is so small and so tightly mixed that when it finally scrapes the bottom of its fuel, it does not swell. It contracts. It gets hotter as it fails. And for a brief unnatural stretch, it burns blue, bright, wrong, the opposite of every stellar death anyone on Earth has ever watched. A thing predicted on paper by people who knew perfectly well that nobody would ever see it. Because the universe is far too young to have made one yet. Not one. Not anywhere. There has never been enough time. Then it collapses. A white husk, small and dense and going nowhere. One more thing the sky will not replace. And it might be the strangest funeral in physics. This little scream of blue at the end of a life spent being the dimmest thing in the room. And you cannot look away from it, and there is nobody to tell. So you go looking for the last one. It takes a while, in the way that everything takes a while now. The sky has become mostly a habit of darkness, with a few embers set into it, and you follow them down and out and down again, and eventually there is one. Call it Proxima. You may as well. That is the archetype, the small red thing 4 light years from a porch you once stood on, invisible to your eye on the best night of your life, sitting there the whole time you were alive and never once asking to be noticed. Out here it is still going. Every star anyone ever wrote a poem about is a cold husk. Every sun that ever warmed a world into oceans is done. And this one, the kind of star that most people alive tonight have never consciously looked at, not once, not on purpose, is the last true light in the universe. It is a lantern wick drawn down to a thread, so dim you can look straight at it without squinting, so dim that the word star feels like an exaggeration, and yet it is the only thing in all of creation still turning hydrogen into anything at all. And you understand, floating there, that the universe's final light was never going to be the beautiful kind. It was always going to be this, the one that was overlooked, the one that lasted precisely because it never burned hard enough to be worth pointing at. I find that harder to shake than any of the big numbers. The showy things go first. The patient, unremarkable thing is what gets to be last. And if you are still awake for that, still here in the dark with a small red thing at the end of everything, you are the kind of person this whole channel is built for. Most of the world would rather be handed a comfort about all this. You came looking for the ember instead, and you wanted to see it plainly, at an hour when nobody's performing at you. If that is you, follow Space Theories to sleep on Spotify, and I will keep bringing you the endings told gently, for as long as you want to sit with them. Now let the drift carry you a little further, because the last ember does not know it is the last. That is the part that stays with me. It burns exactly the way it has burned for 10 trillion years, with the same slow patience, and there is no signal in it, no acknowledgement, no dimming with intent. It has no idea it is holding the final flame of a universe. It is just doing the only thing it was ever able to do, which is not very much. Very slowly. For a very long time. You think about a candle in a house where everyone has already left. It does not burn differently. It does not know. And around it the cold has become the actual condition of things. Not cold like a winter. Not cold like space as you understood space, which always had a sun somewhere over your shoulder, always had a warm side and a shadow side. This is temperature approaching the bottom, all the way out, in every direction, with no warm side left anywhere. The dark is not the absence of light. It is what the light became. You reach out. You cannot feel the star. You're close enough to see it, and it gives you nothing. There is a possibility that you have been circling this whole time without naming it, and it is not that the universe ends. It is that the universe simply runs out of new things to do, and then keeps going anyway. The fire does not get put out. It gets spent. And spending is slower and stranger than any ending you were ever taught to picture, because it has no last moment, only a long series of moments that are each slightly less than the one before. You watch the thread of the wick. It has been getting thinner for longer than you have any capacity to hold. Here's the thing you did not expect to feel out here. at the end of the stars. It is not fear, it is a kind of tenderness for the little red thing, for the 7 out of 10 that nobody counted, for the whole long, unglamorous majority of everything, which was always the actual sky, and which you spent your entire life not seeing while you looked at the loud ones. You were early. That is the whole gift, and you did not know you had it. You lived in the 1% of the story where the sky still made things, where the gas had not run out, where a person could walk outside and see 1,000 suns and call them ordinary. There might never be an observer for what comes next. There might never be eyes for the last blue flare or the last red thread, and if there are not, then it happens in a universe with no witness, which is the same as saying it happens quietly. The ember burns on, not brightly, not for you. You're sitting in the dark with that ember, and a small question is working its way up through you. It is the question that always comes at this hour. How does anyone know any of this? Not the poetry of it, the actual claim that somebody on a rock with a machine looked at a smear of light and came back with the end of everything. So let the far future thin out for a moment. Come back down. Stand in a long hallway instead. It is dark, and at the far end someone is holding a single candle. You cannot see the person. You cannot see the walls. You cannot see how long the hallway is. All you have is that one small flame and one thing you already know about it, which is exactly how bright it burns when you hold it in your own hand. That is the whole trick. That is the entire method, sitting right there in front of you. Because if you know how bright the candle truly is, then how faint it looks does the measuring for you. Dim by a little, and the person is a few steps off. Dim by a lot, and they are far down the hall. You're not guessing at the distance. The light is handing it to you. The dimming is the ruler. Now take the hallway and open it out until the walls fall away, and it is the universe, and the candle is a star tearing itself apart. Certain exploding stars do this obligingly. They go off with something close to the same true brightness every time, near enough that you can treat them as a known flame. So when one of them lights up in some far galaxy and arrives at you as a barely there smudge on a detector, that faintness is not a disappointment. It is data. It tells you how far down the hall that galaxy is standing. You get distance out of nothing but how faint a thing looks. Sit with that for a second, because everything downstream of it depends on it holding. But distance alone is only half of what you need. A hallway with a candle in it tells you how far. It does not tell you whether the person holding it is walking away. So here comes the second reading, and this one is stranger and gentler. Light arrives at you stretched. Space itself has been growing the whole time that light has been in flight, and the wave has grown with it, pulled longer, slid down toward the red end. You would never see it by eye. But every element leaves the same fingerprint in light, dark lines in fixed places, a barcode that iron always makes and hydrogen always makes, the same in a laboratory in Arizona as in a galaxy you will never touch. And when that barcode arrives at you with every line shifted the same distance toward red, you can measure exactly how far it slid. That slide is a speed, how fast the thing is running away from you. Now put the two readings in the same hand, how far away it is, how fast it is going. Do that for one galaxy, and you have a curiosity. Do that for millions of galaxies at millions of different distances, and something opens up under you. Because distance in this game is also time. The far ones are old light, the near ones are young light. So a stack of distances and speeds is not a map. It is a recording. It is the whole history of the expansion, laid out in order, playing back. That is how you read the end of the universe out of a smear. You do not look at the end. You look at the past closely enough, and you let the curve tell you where it is heading. Which is a beautiful thing to say and an exhausting thing to actually do. So people industrialized it. Picture a telescope on a mountain in Arizona, the Mayol, an old instrument with a new thing bolted into its throat. Thousands of thin optical fibers, each one aimed each one swallowing the light of one particular galaxy and carrying it off to be unwound into its spectrum. Thousands at once. Every time the sky moves, they reposition and drink again. That is decay, and it is doing the fingerprint reading, the redshift, the how fast, on a scale no human eye could survive. Meanwhile, high in Chile, the dark energy camera is doing the wide sweep, the broad take of the sky that says where everything is and how bright it came in. Real hardware, cold metal in the night air, actual glass with dust on it, and their 2024 and 2025 data is what reopened all of this. Not a thought experiment, a shed full of fibres and a number that came out of it slightly wrong. Here is the part I find hard to leave alone. The number did not come out wrong enough to settle anything, because there is a scale for that, and it is worth having, since it is the difference between a rumour and a fact. Physicists count in sigma. It is just a way of asking how likely it is that noise alone could fake what you are seeing. 2.5 to about 3.9 sigma is the universe raising an eyebrow at you. It is a pattern you would not bet your life against, and also not one you would bet your life on. 5 sigma is where the field agrees to use the word discovery. Decay's preference for a dark energy that changes with time, that weakens, that is not the fixed constant everybody built the last quarter century on, sits in the eyebrow range. It is not nothing. It got stronger between the first data release in 2024 and the second in 2025. It leaned further in. But it has not stood up and said its name. So the honest picture at this hour is a room full of very careful people, looking at a curve that is not quite the shape it was supposed to be, and refusing to shout. And they have a good reason to hold their voices down, because the whole method has a soft spot, and they know exactly where it is. Go back to the hallway. The entire thing worked, because you knew how bright the candle truly burned. Every distance you pulled out of the dark came from that one assumption. So what happens if the candles are not all the same? What if the old ones, the ones burning in ancient galaxies far down the hall, are subtly different from the fresh ones nearby? Not by much, just a little, just enough. Then the ruler bends. And it does not bend randomly. It bends systematically, with distance, which is to say with time, which is exactly where you are reading the story. Every conclusion downstream tilts with it. That is why a team in South Korea, looking at 300 galaxies in 2025, could claim the expansion has already started slowing, and pin the strength of an age bias in the sample at 99.999%, and still call their own result preliminary and say out loud that it needs independent confirmation. They know what they would be overturning. 27 years of settled ground. I love that they said it themselves. It is the least glamorous sentence in cosmology and the most trustworthy one. And if you are the sort of person who would rather sit in the dark with an unresolved argument than be handed a clean answer that has not earned itself yet, that is a good temperament. And it is most of why you are still awake. If this is your kind of quiet, you can follow the channel on Spotify and let the next one find you. Because the argument does not stay open forever. That is the thing that makes this one different. There is an observatory in Chile called the Vera C. Rubin, and it is built to stare at the whole southern sky again and again, night after night, catching the things that change. Every exploding star it sees is another candle in the hallway. It is expected to add more than 20,000 new supernova host galaxies inside about 5 years. 20,000 against 300. That is not a debate that gets talked to death. That is a debate with a scheduled answer. Somebody alive right now, maybe somebody your age, is going to open a file and find out whether the universe is coasting or slowing or coming back. So when you hear that the ending is uncertain, understand what the uncertainty is actually made of. It is not a shrug. It is a candle, a stretched barcode, thousands of fibers on an Arizona mountain, and a soft spot everyone is watching. That is all. That is the whole apparatus that has to carry the fate of everything. It might be enough. In 5 years or so, it might not have to be. and that is where the hallway ends and the dark comes back. Because whatever the answer turns out to be, none of it changes what happens out here, at the far edge, where the last small red star has finally used the last of itself. And when that last ember finally lets go, you look up and you notice what is not there. And when that last ember finally lets go, you look up and you notice what is not there. It takes a moment. That is the strange part. Absence does not announce itself. You're standing in the dark on nothing in particular, in the habit of a body you no longer strictly need, and your eye keeps doing what an eye does. It looks for the smudges, the faint ovals, the grain of light that any patient watcher on any world would have learned to call other galaxies. And the eye finds the black and skims past it, and comes back and skims past it again, because the black is uniform and the eye has nothing to catch on. Everything outside your own small huddle of galaxies has gone. Not exploded, not swallowed. Gone in a quieter way than that, and the quiet is what makes it hard to feel. Turn the clock back and you can watch it happen from here, slow as a tide. About 100 billion years back down the road, the light from those distant galaxies is still technically arriving, but it is arriving wrong, stretched, reddened past the far edge of red into wavelengths so long and so cold that no instrument you could build would call it a picture of anything. Redshifts over 5,000. That is one of those numbers you can set down like a stone in a stream, step on it once, and leave behind. What it means is simpler. The light comes in exhausted. It comes in with its colour drained out. Keep going, and the drain becomes absurd. By 10 trillion years, the numbers physicists put on that stretching climb to something like a 1 with 53 zeros behind it. There is no honest way to picture that. Do not try. Just hold the feel of it, which is a page left too long in a sunlit room until the ink lifts off it and the paper reads as blank. The words were there. The paper is still there. The reading is over. And this is where it turns, because the galaxies never actually leave. That is the thing your gut refuses. Your gut wants them to be somewhere else. Somewhere over the hill, some other room you could reach if you walked long enough and hard enough. They're not somewhere else. They're exactly where they were, doing exactly what they were doing, wheeling and burning down their own last coals, and the space between you and them is simply growing faster than any light can cross it. The distance is not a distance anymore. It is a decision the universe has already made. Their light is out there, right now, forever falling short, never arriving again, not in a trillion years of waiting, not to any telescope anyone anywhere could ever build. They do not move away from you so much as they stop being reachable. There is a difference, and you feel it as a kind of vertigo. You could send a message with your whole heart in it, and it would travel outward at the exact speed the universe permits, and it would still lose the race, every second further behind forever. Nothing you have ever lost has been lost like that. You're watching them go the way the windows of a town go out behind you as you drive at night. One, then a few, then a scatter, then the idea of a town, and then only the road and the dark and the sense that you have been alone for longer than you noticed. Come forward again, 2 trillion years, give or take, and the road has run all the way out. Stand here. This is your sky now. Your galaxy is not your galaxy anymore, not exactly. Andromeda came in a long time ago, in the way two things collide when they have all the patience in the world, and what is left is one broad body of stars, wide and settled, with no memory of being two. That is the whole world. Stars above you, thinning and reddening, all of them yours in the sense that they are the only ones there are. And beyond them, at the edge where you used to be able to find something, anything, a faint oval, a sprinkle of far-off grain, there is now a black so total and so smooth that it does not read as a place at all. It reads as a wall, and the stillness of it is the thing I cannot put down. Because there is no redshift out there, no stretching, no visible expansion. Not because the expansion stopped, but because everything that ever demonstrated it has already left. The universe is running exactly as hard as it ever was, tearing itself apart with a patience beyond arithmetic, and the skies are held breath, perfectly calm, perfectly static, a machine whose motion you can only see by watching the things it carries away, and it has carried them all away. Now hold that against a small figure standing in the same dark, some long time after you. Somebody is there, not you. Somebody who was born into this. Perhaps not a person in any shape you would recognize, perhaps something else entirely, but curious in the way you are curious, patient in the way you have been patient. They build a telescope, they build a good one, they grind the mirror and they mount it and they go out under the only sky they have ever known and they point it at the blankness, because the blankness is interesting to anyone with a mind, and it gives them nothing. Not a hint, not a smear, not one faint stubborn photon carrying the news. Perfect, uniform blank, in every direction, out to the limit of whatever they can build. So they do what you would do. They reason carefully. They conclude with real rigour, with no error anywhere in the chain, that the cosmos is one island of stars floating in an infinite, an empty and eternal dark, which is exactly what people here believed before the 1920s. It is exactly the picture Hubble tore up when he found that the smudges were other galaxies and that they were running. That future astronomer, in the same dark, with the same hunger, arrives at the retired answer, and they are not wrong. They are doing everything right. The evidence is simply left. Think about how gentle that is. Nothing lied to them. Nobody burned the library. The universe just held up its hands and let the record drift out of reach, and the reasoning was honest all the way down to a conclusion that used to be false and is now, in every way they can test, true. And it is not only the galaxies they lose, it is the whole case. Krauss and Starkman walked this out in a paper that reads, "If you let it, like a eulogy." There are 3 pillars holding up everything we know about the beginning. The first is the running of the galaxies, and you have already watched that one go. The second is the microwave glow, the leftover heat of the fireball, the faint hiss that soaks every direction of this sky right now, and tells you plainly that there was once a fire. That glow stretches too. It thins and it cools and it lengthens until it slips under the floor of anything detectable, until it is not a hiss, but a theoretical footnote about a hiss. Gone. The third is the recipe of the light elements, the hydrogen and the helium in a fixed ratio that only a very hot young universe could have cooked, and that one is not carried away so much as covered up, buried under generation after generation of stars remaking the mix until the original proportions are gone under the paint. 1, 2, 3, out. And every one of them goes out for good, for everyone born after the horizon closes. Not hidden, not hard to find, absent from the reachable universe. The observations that told us who we are and where we came from become, in that sky, unperformable. There is no experiment. There is no clever workaround. There is nothing left to measure. I sit with that longer than I should, perhaps because it is the one ending that does not need any of the dramatic machinery. Not fire, not a tearing. Nothing collapses. The universe simply keeps doing the ordinary thing it has been doing since before your son had a name, and the ordinary thing is enough. Here's the part I did not expect to feel out here. All of it happens on time. Nothing goes wrong. The expansion is not a villain. It is not even fast, not in any way you could stand in and notice. It is just relentless, and it never once takes a night off. And given long enough, relentless beats everything, including the truth. And that is the door I keep walking back through. Everyone argues about fire or ice, whether it burns or whether it freezes, whether the whole thing snaps back into a fireball or thins away into a cold that never quite finishes. People pick sides on that the way they pick sides on anything, and they are arguing about the very last page of a book whose middle chapters have already been torn out and thrown into the wind, because the universe does not have to end for your view of it to end. Those are 2 different events, and the second one comes first, and it comes so much earlier that the argument about the ending is almost a luxury. Long before a single star runs out, long before any matter comes apart, the sky empties, and it does not empty all at once, for everyone in one shared and dignified moment. That is the part that stays with me. Each surviving pocket of matter gets its own version. Every island of galaxies still bound tightly enough to hold hands against the expansion gets cut loose from all the others in its own time, on its own schedule, and none of them can tell each other. There is no last night for the universe. There are countless last nights staggered across an unimaginable span, each one private, each one witnessed by whoever happens to still be there, if anyone is, and never reported, because reporting has become physically impossible. You are watching one of them. That is what this dark is. Somebody else's is happening somewhere else, at this exact moment, and there is no somewhere else anymore. I'm not sure what to do with the tenderness in that. There is a possibility, small, unprovable, that some of those pockets keep records, that someone writes it down before the horizon shuts and hands the writing forward, generation to generation, across spans that make your entire species look like a spark off a flint, and that the writing survives and is believed, and a mind out in that blankness knows about the fireball, not because it can see the evidence, but because someone once could and cared enough to say so. Perhaps that happens. It is the kindest thing I can imagine happening. But belief is not evidence, and a story you cannot check is only a story. In time it might soften into myth, the way everything unverifiable eventually does. It might get argued over. It might get quietly dropped by careful people, because careful people are supposed to drop what they cannot test, and they will be right to drop it. And dropping it will be the moment the Big Bang stops being a fact and becomes a rumor about a fire. That is the erasure, not the burning of the record simply becoming unreadable, everywhere, at once, forever. You stand in it a while longer, because there is nothing else to do and no hurry left anywhere in the cosmos. The wall of black does not move. Your galaxy holds its stars the way a hand holds water, and you understand, finally, what has actually been taken from you out here, not the light. The light was always going to fade. What is gone is the outside, the elsewhere. The reasonable assumption that anything you cannot see is still there in some sense that matters. You've been carrying that assumption your whole life without knowing it, and it has quietly expired, and the sky's telling you so in the only language it has left, which is nothing at all. Before you set it down, stay with the telescope a while longer. The tube in your hands has a lineage, and the lineage is a detective story, and the last page of it is the sky you are standing under now. Go back 100 years and stand in an unheated dome somewhere in the hills above a small American city. It is the early 1900s. You are cold. Your fingers are ink-stained. On the glass plate in front of you there is a smudge. Not a star, because a star is a point, hard and clean. This is a fuzz. A little thumbprint of light with no edges. There are hundreds of them scattered across the plates, and nobody in the room agrees on what they are. Half the astronomers of that generation will tell you the smudges are clouds. Gas. Inside our own galaxy, condensing into new suns, local weather in a cosmos that is one single island of stars floating in nothing at all. That was the picture. Not a poetic flourish, an actual working model taught and defended. Our galaxy was the universe. Beyond its rim there was no beyond. The Milky Way was the entire address, and the smudges were furniture inside the house. The other half will tell you the smudges are other houses. Nobody can settle it, because settling it needs a ruler, and nobody has a ruler long enough. You cannot triangulate a fuzzy thumbprint. So the argument goes on for decades, gentlemen in wool coats raising their voices in lecture halls, and the smudges just sit there on the plates, patient, saying nothing. Then in the 1920s, a man named Edwin Hubble points a very large mirror at one of them and takes it apart. Picture what that means physically. The smudge stops being a smudge. Under enough glass and enough patience it resolves, the way a distant city at night resolves as your train gets closer, first a glow, then a smear, then, suddenly and irreversibly, individual windows. Hubble finds stars inside the fuzz, real stars. And some of them are the kind that pulse on a schedule you can read like a tape measure, and the tape measure says, this thing is not in our galaxy. It is not anywhere near our galaxy. It is a separate island, entire, with its own 100 billion suns, and it is unthinkably far away. The house has neighbours. That happens in your grandparents' lifetime, or your great-grandparents. It is that recent. Every person who lived and died before roughly a century ago died believing the sky was one room, and then Hubble does the second thing, which is worse and better. He looks at the light coming off those neighbour galaxies and finds it stretched, reddened, slid down toward the low end of the spectrum, and the further away a galaxy is, the more it is slid, which has exactly one honest reading. They are going, all of them, in every direction, away from each other, like ink dropped in water. That is the moment the universe stops being a place and becomes a story. Because if everything is flying apart, then run the film backward and everything was together, and if everything was together, then there was a beginning, and if there was a beginning, then time has a direction and the cosmos has a plot. Every question you have ever had about where any of this came from is downstream of a man in a cold dome noticing that the colours were wrong. Now come forward to 1998 and stand behind two rival teams who are both trying to measure how much the expansion is slowing down. Not whether, how much. Everyone assumes gravity is quietly applying the brakes, patiently pulling the ink back toward the drop. They are looking for the number. The number comes back with the wrong sign. It is not slowing, it is speeding up. Something is pushing, and nobody knows what it is. So it gets a placeholder name, dark energy, which is a polite way of writing a question mark into an equation and moving on. That result has now stood for 27 years. It has been poked at, remeasured, argued over, and it has not fallen. It is the accepted floor everyone else builds on. So that is the arc you inherited. One island, then many islands, then many islands, fleeing. Here's the turn in the story, and it is the kind of turn that makes a detective set down his notes and stare at the wall. Two physicists, Lawrence Krauss and Glenn Starkman, sat down with that accepted, boring 27-year-old fact and followed it forward instead of backward. If the galaxies are receding, and the recession is accelerating, then the redshift on each of them is not a fixed feature. It is a dial, and the dial only turns one way. Run it out 100 billion years, and the light from the nearest strangers arrives stretched past a redshift of 5,000, which means it arrives as nothing you could photograph. Run it to 10 trillion years, and the stretch is a number with 53 zeros in it. That is not faint. That is not hard to see. That is gone, permanently, past a horizon that light itself cannot swim back across. And the mechanism that hid them is the same mechanism that revealed them. The expansion was the evidence. The expansion is also the eraser. The single fact that let a man in a dome discover the universe is the fact that will, on a schedule, take it back. Think about what a telescope will be for then. Sometime around 2 trillion years from now, long before the last stars burn out, long before matter itself begins to come apart, the sky will simply have emptied, not dimmed, emptied. Whatever is left of our little cluster of galaxies will have merged into one blur of stars, and past its rim there will be black, and the black will be honest and complete. No Andromeda, no smudges to argue about, nothing to resolve. The three things that let anyone prove there was a beginning all go with it. The receding galaxies, gone past the horizon. The faint bath of heat left over from the first fire, stretched so thin it drops below anything you could build an instrument to catch. Even the telltale recipe of the light elements, the exact hydrogen to helium ratio the early universe cooked and left as a signature, gets buried under trillions of years of stars processing it into something else. Every fingerprint, wiped in order by ordinary physics doing what it does. And here is the part that sits in my chest and will not move. The astronomers of that era will still exist, or something like them might. They will be curious. They will be careful. They will build good instruments and check each other's work, and they will look up at one static island of stars surrounded by nothing, and they will conclude rigorously and honestly that the universe is one island of stars surrounded by nothing. They will arrive back at exactly the picture Hubble destroyed, and there will be no smudge on any plate to argue about, no fuzz to resolve, no wrongness in the colours. Their data will be clean, and their reasoning will be sound, and their conclusion will be false, and nothing available to them anywhere in their reachable cosmos could ever tell them so. They will be right about everything they can see. They will be wrong about everything that is. Whether anything of ours makes it across that gap, nobody can tell you. Maybe records survive. Maybe some deep archive carries the story forward, hand to hand for 2 trillion years, and a scholar reads that once the sky was full of other galaxies and they were all running away. But then what does she have? A claim with no evidence behind it, in a universe where every check she could run comes back negative. Whether that even counts as knowing is not a question anyone has settled, and I'm not sure it is a question physics can answer. A story you cannot test is a rumour, a beautiful one, still a rumour. It is like a photograph left face up in a drawer, still there, still yours, and every year a little less of anyone in it. The strange gift in all of this is the timing. You are alive during the narrow window when the universe is still willing to answer questions about itself. The evidence is out there tonight, above your roof, arriving. It has not left yet. Most of the future does not get this. So the sky over your head is not a fixed thing you happen to be under. It is a closing door, and you're standing in the light of it, in the only stretch of cosmic time when looking up actually tells you the truth. You lower the telescope and you put your hand out in the dark to check that anything at all is still solid. You lower the telescope and you put your hand out in the dark to check that anything at all is still solid. You lower the telescope and you put your hand out in the dark to check that anything at all is still solid. It is. Your fingers close on nothing and find themselves, knuckle, tendon, the small resistance of your own palm pressing back. This is the oldest comfort there is. Whatever else has gone out of the sky, the hand is still a hand. So stay there a moment. Feel how convincing it is. Now let the ground shift under that feeling, gently, the way it does when you're almost asleep and the bed seems to tilt. Because solidity is not a state, it is a rate. Everything you have ever leaned on is not holding still, it is leaking, and the only reason it feels permanent is that the leak is slower than everything you're made to notice. Start with the smallest brick. Inside your hand, inside the bone and the water and the salt, there are protons, and for most of the last century they were assumed to be simply eternal, not long-lived, eternal. A proton was the thing you got to stop asking about. Then the grand unified theories arrived, the attempts to fold the forces into one, and they came with a quiet cost buried in the arithmetic. The proton may not be perfectly stable, it may have a lifetime, not a violent one, not a scheduled one, just a probability thin as a rumour that any given proton simply comes apart into lighter things and stops being a proton at all. So people went looking, deep under a mountain in Japan, in a tank of ultra-pure water watched by thousands of eyes made of glass, in a dark so complete it has to be engineered, They have been waiting for one proton out of a truly absurd number of protons to die. And in all that watching, nobody has ever seen it happen. Not once. What they got instead was a flaw. A number that says, if the proton decays at all, it lasts longer than about 10 to the 34th years. That is a 1 with 34 zeros walking away behind it. Set it down. You do not need to carry it. It is a stone in the path, and you can step on it and keep going. But notice what the flaw actually says. It does not say never. It says not yet, not here, not while we were looking, and that is the shape of everything from here on. Not a collapse, a leak. So walk on and let the time you're walking through get thick. The stars are gone behind you. The sky is empty, and in the emptied middle of what used to be a galaxy, something is still there. Patient, enormous. The last piece of architecture standing after the building has weathered away. A black hole, a supermassive one. Already billions of years old on the night you were born. Already ancient while the first fish were learning to breathe. It sat at the center of everything and swallowed and grew and outlasted every star that ever orbited it. And it is dying too. It has been dying the whole time. You cannot see it. That is the strange part. The process that is killing it is so faint, so cold, so nearly nothing, that from the outside it looks exactly like an object doing absolutely nothing forever. But energy is trickling off it, thinner than starlight, and it has been trickling since before you existed, and it will not be finished for another googol years. 10 to the 100th. Another stone. Step on it. Forget it. A smaller one. A black hole the weight of a single dead sun goes faster. 10 to the 67th years. Faster is a joke here. Faster is a word that has stopped meaning anything. I find this the hardest thing in the whole journey to hold in my head. Not the size of the numbers, the patience. Something that has been ending the entire time you thought it was permanent. It is a bar of soap worn down to a sliver in a hand that never once felt it getting smaller. Keep walking, let the hole shrink. And here is the part that turns the whole picture upside down, quietly, without raising its voice. The smaller it gets, the hotter it gets. That is backwards from every dying thing you have ever watched. A fire dims as it goes, an ember cools, a body cools, but this one warms as it loses itself. And the warmer it gets, the faster it loses itself, and the faster it loses itself, the warmer it gets. And somewhere out at the end of that loop, the whole thing stops being a slow leak and becomes a bright, brief, hard flash of radiation in a room that has been dark for longer than words can carry. And then nothing. No afterglow, no settling. The last event in an empty room, with no one to see it, in a universe where seeing has not been possible for an unthinkable stretch of time. I would like to tell you that it feels like a candle going out. It does not. It is closer to frost lifting off a windshield without ever melting, dry, going straight to air. The glass suddenly clear and no water anywhere to prove the frost was ever there. That was the story for a long time. Black holes leak. Everything else waits. Ordinary matter, rock, iron, bone, was supposed to sit out the whole performance, cold and inert until something else came for it. Then, in 2023, a few physicists at Radboud University in the Netherlands, Falke and Vondrak and Van Zuilenkom, went back through the arithmetic and found that the leak does not need a black hole to happen in. The mechanism, as they read it, is about gravity bending the emptiness around any dense object at all. Not about the horizon, not about the point of no return, just about mass curving space and space quietly giving up particles because of it. Which means a neutron star, a thing with no horizon, a solid corpse of a star, is also evaporating. The number for that is 10 to the 67th years. Roughly the same as the black hole. The horizon, the thing everyone thought was doing the work, turns out to maybe not have been the point. And then they did the thing that makes this study the one people repeat at 3 in the morning. They kept going. They ran the same arithmetic on the moon. Look up. This is not there anymore, of course. Nothing is. But hold the idea of it. That pale, dry, cratered rock, the most boring permanent object in your childhood sky, the thing that was already old when the first eye opened. Under this framework, it is leaking, not being hit by anything, not eroding, just quietly turning into radiation because it has mass, and mass bends emptiness, and bent emptiness does not stay perfectly empty. 10 to the 90th years for the moon to be gone, and the number they wrote next to a human body, purely as illustration, purely to show you where the line lands, is the same. 10 to the 90th years. Take that back to your hand. Because the thing you are checking in the dark, the fingers, the knuckle, the resistance of your own palm, is not an exception to any of this. It is on the list. It is not on the list as a metaphor or a poem. Under this framework, the process that will one day dismantle a supermassive black hole into a flash of nothing is running in your hand tonight, at this hour, in this bed, at a rate so shallow that it is completely indistinguishable, moment to moment, from simply being alive. You will never feel it. That is guaranteed. Nothing about it will ever announce itself. Every second of your entire life is a second in which this is happening, and in which it is impossible to notice. Think about what that quietly does to the word permanent. It does not delete it. It just moves it out past the horizon of anything that could ever check. You share an expiration date with the moon, with a mountain, with every dead star still out there in the black. Not a similar one. The same one, near enough, written in the same arithmetic, for the same reason, and the reason is only that you have mass. And mass is a kind of slow leak. There is something almost tender in it, if you let it sit long enough. The universe did not make an exception of you in either direction. It did not spare you, and it did not single you out. Bone and rock got the same terms. The moon is not more permanent than you are. It is just slower to admit it, and the difference between its patience and yours is a rounding error at these depths. That is the ending then. Not a bang and not a wall of fire, a long, silent, universal thinning. Black holes going first, or rather going last and then going anyway. The last flash in the last dark. And then radiation, spread so thin across so much room that nothing can ever gather again. Nothing can burn, nothing can think, nothing can be checked against anything else. But before you settle into that, let me be honest about the ground you're standing on, because it is thinner than the confidence in my voice suggests. Nobody has ever seen a black hole evaporate, not a flicker of it. Hawking radiation is the beating heart of everything I just walked you through, and it exists entirely on paper. It is very likely right. The math is beautiful, and it holds, and almost everyone who works on it believes it, but it has never once been watched, and the proton has never been caught dying either. All those years under the mountain, all that ultra-pure water, all that dark, and the only thing anyone has to show for it is a lower bound. A flaw, a statement about how long we have failed to see something, which is not the same thing as a statement about the thing itself. So the whole cathedral you have just walked through, the leaking hand, the evaporating moon, the last hard flash in the empty room might be exactly true, and it might be a very good guess dressed in very good arithmetic, and nobody can say for sure from inside a lifetime this short. This is physics that no one has watched happen. It may be that no one ever can. The experiment takes longer than the universe has been running, and the observer would have to outlive the thing being observed. That is a strange and slightly funny predicament to fall asleep inside. We built a complete and detailed account of the last moments of everything, and the only honest label on it is a maybe, and it is the most confident maybe science has ever produced. Which leaves you here, hand out in the dark, solid, for now, by any measure you will ever be able to take, leaking according to a theory nobody has ever confirmed, at a rate that makes the whole age of the universe look like a held breath. You're still lying in the dark, and somewhere above you, 3 quiet arguments against all of this are still running. The The first one is spinning. It is a disc, about a foot across, gold-plated copper, bolted to the side of a spacecraft that left Florida in 1977 and has not stopped since. You're floating out there with it now. There is no sound because there is nothing to carry sound. The disc is not playing. It is just holding still in a cold so complete it has no real name, and its grooves are cut into the gold at a depth you could feel with a fingernail if you ran your hand across it. Ridges holding a voice that nobody is ever going to lift out of them. Greetings in dozens of languages are down in those ridges. A heartbeat. Waves on a shore you will never stand on again. All of it pressed into soft metal because soft metal forgets slowly. The people who built it did the arithmetic. Gold does not rust. Vacuum does not weather. Out there, the only thing that touches the record is the occasional grain of interstellar dust, arriving once in a very long while, and the engineers worked out that at that rate the grooves stay legible for something like 1 billion years. Say that number once and then let it go. 1 billion years. A stone you step on and step off. You're drifting alongside it, and you can feel the shape of what they did. They addressed a package to a listener who almost certainly cannot exist. Not because space is empty, though it might be, because of timing. By the time that record has finished being readable, the star it came from will have swollen and shed itself and shrunk to an ember. The species that pressed those grooves will be a thin layer in a rock nobody is digging. The record will still be legible, and legible will not mean anything, because reading requires somebody with hands. I find that the part I cannot set down, not the loneliness of it, the politeness of it. They put a needle and instructions on the cover. They explained how to spin it. They were courteous to a stranger they knew, statistically was never coming. Let the record go on ahead of you and come back down through the atmosphere back to solid ground into a mountain in West Texas. You're inside rock now. The tunnel goes in horizontally and then the stairway starts, cut by hand out of limestone, spiraling upward through the mountain's insides. It is dark. It is dry. The air does not move much. Somewhere above you in that shaft there is a machine assembling itself out of titanium and quartz and marine-grade steel, and it is a clock. It is meant to run for 10,000 years. Nobody maintains it. That is the entire point of it. Every part of it is chosen because it does not care whether you come back. Titanium against stainless steel, because they will not weld themselves together over centuries of touching. Ceramic bearings that need no oil, because oil goes to varnish, and varnish goes to glue. It winds itself off the temperature difference between day and night on the mountain's face, the rock breathing warm and cool, and that breath is enough to keep it going. Roughly $42 million, most of it from Jeff Bezos, poured into a hole in the ground so that a mechanism can tick alone in the dark. Stand in there with it. You cannot see it. You can only hear it. A slow escapement. One beat every 10 seconds, and then long nothing, and then another beat. 10,000 years of that. The whole span of human agriculture, of writing, of cities, of everything you would call history, running once more in that shaft, unattended. And you're standing there in the black with your hand on cold limestone, and you can feel the joke the builders cannot escape and did not try to. 10,000 years does not register. Against the numbers you have already been walking through tonight, it is not a small figure. It is not a figure at all. If the black holes take 10 to the 67th years to bleed away, then that clock's entire designed life is a flicker so brief it would not show up in the accounting. It is a held breath. It is less than a held breath. They knew. That is what stays with me. They ran the same arithmetic you have been running, and they cut the mountain anyway. There is a third one, and it is the strangest of the three because it was not built to last. It was built to catch something dying. You're underground again, this time in Japan, 1/2 mile of rock over your head, in an old mine. In front of you is a tank. It is a cylinder about 120 feet tall and 130 feet across, and it is full of 50,000 tons of water so pure it is almost frightening. Water with nothing in it. water that would leach the minerals straight out of your body if you drank it. The walls are studded with more than 11,000 glass eyes, each one the size of a beach ball, all of them staring inward at the water. They are waiting for one flash. Here's the thing they're waiting for. Some theories say the proton is not truly permanent. Not the atom, not the molecule. The proton, the little positive core of ordinary matter, the thing your bones are made of underneath everything else. If those theories hold, then a proton can simply come apart on its own, without being hit, without being provoked, and when it does, it should throw off a brief cone of blue light. That water is there so that when one of them lets go somewhere in that vast still pool, 11,000 eyes see the glow, and you are floating in that dark tank, and the water is perfectly still, and nothing happens. Nothing happens for a year. Nothing happens for a decade. Nothing happens for decades. That is the result. That is what the machine produced, not a discovery. An absence patiently and expensively accumulated, and the absence itself is the number. Because they can count how many protons are sitting in that tank, and they can count the years of watching, and if not one of them so much as twitched in all that time, then the average proton has to live longer than about 10 to the 34th years. That is what the emptiness brought. 2 spacecraft records and a mountain clock were built to persist. This one was built to watch matter fail, and matter refused to fail on camera, and refusing was the answer. I like the symmetry of it, sitting in the dark with it. One object saying, "Please remember us." One object saying, "Please keep time for us." One object saying, "Please, just once, come apart so we can watch," and the universe declining for 30 years without comment. If you're the kind of person who lies awake and finds this soothing rather than grim, who would rather sit with the real numbers at 3 in the morning than be handed a comfortable version, you're in the right place, and you can carry this along with you on Spotify if that is where you drift off. Follow along there. The dark is the same either way, but you might as well have company in it. Now hold all 3 of those objects at once, 1 billion years of gold, 10,000 years of quartz and titanium, 30 years of water refusing to flash, and against them, the number you already know, 10 to the 67th, the span it takes for a single collapsed star to bleed itself into nothing. There is no comparison to draw. That is the honest shape of it. 1 billion years is not a fraction of 10 to the 67th. It is a rounding error against a rounding error. If the whole life of the golden record were a single second, the black holes would still be sitting there, undisturbed, for longer than you could count in any unit you have. So none of the 3 works, not as messages. As mail, they fail completely, and yet, you are back on your own ground now, in the dark of your own room, and here is where it turns for me. Those objects are not letters. Nobody who built them believed in the recipient, not really. Sagan knew. The clock people knew. The tank crew knew what a null result was going to look like. They are not communications at all. They are gestures. They are what people do with their hands when they have already read the arithmetic and cannot stop themselves from building. That is possibly the only reading that saves them, and I think it is the true one. A record spinning in vacuum, a mechanism breathing in a mountain, water waiting for a light that does not come, all of it engineered, precisely, patiently, expensively against a clock that does not know they are there. The clock ticks, the gold holds, the universe keeps cooling, and that is the ending everyone has agreed on for decades, which is exactly why the last 2 years have been so unsettling. And that is the ending everyone has agreed on for decades, which is exactly why the last 2 years have been so unsettling. Stand still for a moment in the dark you have been walking through. The road behind you is long and cold and perfectly consistent. Dark energy holds steady, the same push it has always been, never strengthening, never tiring. Space keeps opening, entropy keeps climbing, the way heat always leaves a cup and never returns to it. The temperature falls toward absolute zero and keeps falling and never quite lands. That is the strange courtesy of this ending. It never actually finishes. There is no last frame, no closing shutter, no moment you could point to and say, "There, that was it." Only an approach, forever. You could live with that. People have lived with that for a long time. But the road forks here, and you are standing in the fork, and none of the 3 paths has been closed off yet. Take the first one a little way. In this one, the push that empties the sky is not a constant at all. It is something restless. Physicists give it a number, a little dial called W, and if that dial sits exactly at -1, the universe you just walked through is the one you get. Nudge it slightly below -1 though, and the whole character of the thing changes. The energy in empty space stops being a fixed rent and starts compounding. More space means more of it. More of it means more space. The push feeds itself. Feel what that does. It does not come for you at the end. It comes for you in layers, from the outside in. First the clusters of galaxies unstitch, the great loose federations coming apart like a knot that finally gives. Then galaxies themselves, spiral arms unwinding into nothing, stars flung outward with nothing to catch them. Then whatever solar systems are left, planets simply released, no crash, no impact, just the quiet ending of an arrangement. Then, in the final fraction of a second, atoms. The nucleus and its electrons, held together since a few minutes after everything began, finally too far apart to matter to each other. Space tears faster than any warning could travel across it. There is no seeing it coming. There is only before and then not. The earliest anyone has plausibly penciled it in, working from data a few years old now, is something like 200 billion years out. Set that number down and step off it. It is not a date. It is barely a rumour. Because when you actually measure that little dial, it sits so close to -1, so maddeningly close, that this whole path may simply not exist. It is a door in the fog that may open onto a wall. Now the second path, and this is the one that has been waking people up. In 2025, a physicist at Cornell named Henry Tai, working with Huanghan Liu and Yucheng Qiu, put forward something that would have sounded like nostalgia a decade ago. Imagine an ultralight particle, so faint it barely counts as a thing, whose slow effect is to drag the cosmological constant down. Not to zero, through zero. Positive becomes negative. The push becomes a pull. Picture a bowl of water tipped slowly, so slowly you do not notice the moment it changes, until the water that was running away from you is running back toward the tap. That is the shape of it. Their numbers, and they're careful to call them a proposal, and not a prophecy, have expansion carrying on for another 11 billion years or so. The universe reaches its widest around 33 billion years after the beginning, and then it starts coming home. Tai himself, when asked, hangs the whole thing on a single conditional, if the data holds up. That is the entire load-bearing clause. 2 separate instruments, one in Chile and one in Arizona, released measurements the same year that agree with each other more closely than anyone expected, and that agreement is what let this old idea back into the room. It is not settled, it is not close to settled, but it is standing there, in the light, being taken seriously by people who have spent their careers assuming otherwise, so walk this fork a while, because it is the only one where the sky does something you have never imagined. The emptying stops, the galaxies that spent all that time falling away from each other slow, hang, and turn. The redshift that has been the signature of your whole cosmos reverses. Light that was stretched starts to compress. Everything faint starts to brighten. The sky, which you watched go out window by window like a city seen from a plane, begins lighting back up in the wrong order, the furthest lamps returning first, and it keeps brightening. That is the part that gets into your chest. There is no comfortable middle to settle in. The background radiation, that cold whisper left over from the fireball, warms, then it glows, then it is everywhere at once, and there is no night sky anymore because every direction is a sky. The temperature climbs back through every stage the young universe passed on its way out, and it does not stop at pleasant. Stars cook inside a background hotter than themselves. Molecules come apart. Atoms come apart. The beginning runs backwards frame by frame, and the fireball you came from is also the fireball you go into. Here's the thing that reframes everything if this path turns out to be the real one. Under the long cold ending, you are standing near the very start of an almost endless story, a few pages in, with googles of empty chapters ahead. Under this one, you are not near the start at all. 13.5 billion years done, maybe 20 or so left before the turn, not the opening, somewhere past the middle. The species is not young, it is late. Nobody can tell you which of those you're living in. The standard model, the constant one, the cold one, is still the mainstream answer, and still the one to bet on if you had to bet tonight. The new data leans, it does not shout. A telescope going online soon will add tens of thousands of fresh measurements, and may settle it, or may not. And then there is the third path, and it is the strangest because it does not change the universe at all. It changes you. Lie back into that first ending again, the one everyone agreed on, eternal, cooling, emptying. Ask a simple question. Why do you remember yesterday and not tomorrow? The answer is not really about memory, it is about disorder. The reason you experience time as flowing forward is that entropy in a closed system only ever climbs, and your memories are the low side of that climb. You remember toward the direction things were more ordered. That is all forward means. It is not a river, it is a slope, and you are pointed down it, and every recollection you have is a look back up. Now hold that against eternity. If the universe is genuinely endless, and it just sits there at maximum disorder forever, then random thermal jitter has forever to work with. And random jitter, given forever, does everything. It assembles nonsense. It assembles patterns. Given enough time, it assembles somewhere out of nothing but noise, a fleeting arrangement of matter that is briefly conscious, a mind, complete, with a whole false life folded inside it, a childhood that never happened, a room, a voice in the dark. It exists for an instant and then comes apart. Here is the part that has cost cosmologists sleep. Real observers, ones like you, needed a specific, ordered, fantastically improbable set of conditions and a narrow window of cosmic history to occur in. The random ones need only time, and in this ending time is the one thing that never runs out. So, if you count honestly, count every conscious moment that ever occurs in an eternal universe. The freak accidents outnumber the real lives by a margin that is not close, not by a lot, by an amount that makes the word lot meaningless, which means the model quietly implies that any given moment of experience, including this one, including the weight of your own head right now, is more likely to be a fluke assembled from noise with a false memory of everything before it than a continuous life. I find this one hard to set down, not because I believe it, because of what it does to belief itself. Your memory of this afternoon is evidence, and this argument takes the evidence and makes it the suspect. And notice, cosmologists do not treat it as a party trick, they use it as a weapon. A candidate's theory of the universe that produces too many of these random minds is considered broken by that fact alone. It is a live constraint, an actual filter, and it has never been resolved. The paradox is still sitting there, in the literature, unanswered. So the question of whether you can trust the memory of your own life turns out to depend, faintly and absurdly, on which of these forks you're standing in. There is one more figure out here, and it is less a number than a wall. Don Page worked out how long you would have to wait for a quantum system the size of the observable universe to return, by pure chance, to a state it has already been in. An exact replica. This room, this body, this moment. The answer is a tower of powers, an exponent stacked on an exponent stacked on an exponent, a thing you cannot write in ordinary digits and cannot hold in your head for even a second. Let it go. It is not a length of time. It is a way of saying that in a universe with infinite time and finite states, everything that can happen does again, and the word again stops meaning anything at all. Which leaves one last gentle idea, and it is my favourite, and it is probably dead. In 1979, Freeman Dyson wrote a paper called Time Without End, and it was, of all things, hopeful. He argued that an intelligence in a forever cooling universe need never die. Slow down as the cold deepens. Think less often but never stop. Bank your energy, spend it in smaller and smaller sips, and sleep between the sips, longer and longer hibernations as the temperature drops towards zero. A finite store of energy, spent this carefully, buys an infinite number of thoughts. Not immortality by force, immortality by patience. It is a beautiful piece of arithmetic, and the acceleration you have been walking through all night appears to have broken it. Because a universe with this kind of push has a flaw under it, a faint minimum warmth from the horizon itself, a temperature it never goes below. Dyson's whole strategy depended on the cold always getting colder, on there always being one more step down to take. If there is a flaw, the steps run out. You reach it, and then you are simply warm forever in a universe with nothing warmer and nothing colder anywhere. Think about a room where every draft has stopped, where the air will not move again, ever, in any direction. Nothing in that room can turn a wheel. Not because there is no energy in it. There is plenty. It is just all the same everywhere, and sameness is the one thing you cannot build a thought out of. So there is your fork, and you are still standing in it. A cold that never quite completes. A tearing that may never come. A collapse that may already be scheduled and would make you late rather than early. And underneath all three, a suspicion about your own memory that nobody has managed to talk their way out of. Stay in the dark a moment longer, because there is something you should know about the people who drew the map you've been walking across tonight. They do not agree with each other. Not quietly, not in footnotes. They disagree in public, in journals, in the plain daylight of published work, and the disagreements sit right on top of the parts of the night you just crossed. Go back to the white dwarfs. You were standing among them a little while ago, those cooling husks the size of the earth, with a teaspoon of them weighing tons. In 2020, an astrophysicist named Matt Kaplan at Illinois State looked at the very heaviest of them, the ones carrying between 1.2 and 1.4 solar masses, and did the arithmetic on their far future. They are about 1% of all the stars there are. 1% sounds small until you count it out. 1 billion trillion stars. That is the number he was working with. And what he found is that they do not simply sit there forever. Inside them, atomic nuclei creep toward each other with almost no energy at all, borrowing their way through barriers they should not be able to cross, one improbable event at a time, over spans that make the current age of the universe look like a held breath. Slowly, absurdly slowly, their cores turn to iron, and when enough of the core has turned, the thing gives way. It detonates. A black dwarf supernova, Kaplan called it. One last explosion apiece. Picture where that puts you. The sky's been black for longer than there are words for. There are no stars, no galaxies you can reach, no light anywhere. And then, somewhere out in that nothing, on a schedule of roughly 10 to the 1100th years, a dead thing that has not moved in an eternity remembers how to burn. And then, a long while later, another. Fireworks in an empty stadium, going off one at a time with no one in the seats. I find that image genuinely lovely, which is why the next part lands the way it does, because in 2023, a group at Radboud University, Heino Falke and Michael Wondrak and Walter van Zwijlen ran a different calculation entirely. They took the mechanism behind Hawking radiation and argued it does not need a black hole to work. Curved space is enough. Anything with mass sitting in its own gravitational field bleeds itself away into radiation over time, and when they put white dwarfs through that math, the answer came back at around 10 to the 78th years. Sit with the shape of those two numbers next to each other. 10 to the 78th is not a little earlier than 10 to the 1100th. It is not close. It is not the same species of number. If the Radboud team has it right, then the white dwarfs are gone, dissolved, radiated away into the cold, long before the tunneling in their cores ever finishes its work, which means the last fireworks show in the universe gets cancelled before it is ever scheduled. The stars that were supposed to provide the final explosions evaporate out from underneath the explosions. The stadium empties, and the show simply never happens, and nothing is there to notice that it did not. I want to be honest with you about the status of this. Nobody has settled it. It is not that one side has won and the other has not caught up yet. Two careful groups, doing sober physics, using accepted tools, produced answers that cannot both describe the same universe. There is no experiment. There will never be an experiment. Nothing in this argument will resolve on any timescale that includes a human being, or a species, or a planet, or a star. It is two clocks in the same quiet house disagreeing by an hour, both ticking with total confidence, and no one alive to walk outside and check the sun. That is the actual condition of the far future, not a settled map. An argument still going on in a lit room while everyone else sleeps, and it is not only out there at the end, it reaches back toward you. In November of 2025, a team led by Young-wook Lee at Yonsei University in South Korea looked at 300 galaxies and came out with something that should have been impossible. Their reading of the supernovae in those galaxies suggested the expansion of the universe has already begun to slow down. Not will. Has. They put a figure of 99.99999% significance on the age bias effect sitting underneath their result. The subtle way an older host galaxy can quietly tilt what a supernova appears to say about distance. And then, in the same breath, they called it preliminary. They said it needs independent confirmation. They said so themselves without being pushed, because they understood exactly what they were holding. If it stands, 27 years of cosmology come apart. Everything built since 1998, everything that followed from the discovery that the expansion was speeding up, would have to be lifted off its foundation and set down somewhere else. That is what integrity sounds like, incidentally. A team with a result that could rewrite their entire field, saying out loud that it is probably too early to believe them. If you have made it this deep into the night with me, sitting inside an argument instead of demanding a verdict, you are the kind of person this whole thing is made for. Most people want the answer and want it now. You're somewhere in the dark letting three groups of scientists contradict each other and finding that restful rather than maddening. That is rarer than you would guess. If you want the rest of these nights waiting for you, the channel is on Spotify, and following is the whole of it. Now come back down out of the deep future for a second, all the way down to your own house, and notice that the same disagreement is happening here too, at a scale you can actually hold. The sun swells. That part is not in dispute. In roughly 5 billion years, the photosphere reaches out to where the Earth's orbit is now, about 93 million miles, and Mercury and Venus are simply gone inside it. And the Earth? The older models drown it. The sun expands, the tides drag, the orbit decays, and the planet spirals in and is unmade in the fire. That was the picture for a long time. Their newer modelling, work out of Belgium and France in 2023 and 2024, came at the tidal drag again and found it weaker than the old assumption, while the sun's own mass loss loosens its grip on everything orbiting it. Under that math, the Earth does not fall. It drifts. It moves outward, ahead of the fire, and survives. Survives as what, though? Sterilized rock. Oceans boiled off ages earlier, atmosphere stripped. Every trace of anything that ever lived here burned out of the record long before the question of engulfment even comes due. The debate is not about whether the story ends. It is about whether there is a body left afterward. And nobody can close it. Not because the physics is beyond us, because the numbers are close and the model choices matter, and honest people running honest code land on both sides. So here's the thing you're actually holding tonight. The standard model, the one with dark energy as a true constant, expansion carrying on forever, everything thinning toward cold and quiet, is still the mainstream default. It has not been overthrown, it is still the sensible bet. But every revival you've heard tonight, the collapse scenario, the slowing expansion, the matter dissolving faster than anyone planned, is recent, contested, waiting on data that has not come in yet. That might feel like a failure. It is not. It is what knowing anything looks like from the inside before the arguing stops. The tidy version, the one where the answer is simply known, only ever exists looking backward, after the dust settles and someone writes the textbook and quietly deletes the decade of noise that produced it. You are living in the noise. Everyone always is. So the ending you get is not one ending. It is a room of them, all still open. A universe that thins out into cold forever. A universe that turns around and falls back into itself. A universe where the last stars quietly evaporate before they can give their final performance. And a universe where they get to go out loud. Every one of those is a real possibility held by real people who have looked harder at this than you or I ever will. Whichever of those is waiting, it is not waiting tonight, and tonight is the part you actually get. Whichever of those is waiting, it is not waiting tonight, and tonight is the part you actually get. Whichever of those is waiting, it is not waiting tonight, and tonight is the part you actually get. So come back now. Not all at once. Come back slowly, the way you would come down a staircase in the dark with one hand on the wall, feeling for each step before you trust it. Start where you are, in that last unlit stretch, where nothing burns and nothing falls and nothing is left to arrive. Turn around. Behind you, unimaginably far behind you, there is a faint flash you already walked past, the last spent thing giving up the last of itself, and it is smaller than a match struck in a stadium. Keep coming. The dark begins to have furniture in it again, cold cinders, cold iron, drifting husks that were stars once and remember nothing about it. Keep coming, and the sky refills. Smudges return to it, faint at first, then plain, galaxies swimming back over the horizon like ships that had already gone under it. The record of the beginning walks back into view. Somebody could prove it again now if somebody were here. Keep coming. There is red in the sky now. Dim red points, scattered wide, patient, burning slow. And one of them is the last one, and it does not know that. Then more light. Then crowds of it. Then a hard, bright churn of newborn stars, whole galaxies making them, spending gas the way a young person spends money. Keep coming. There is a wall of red light and it shrinks as you fall toward it. From a wall to a disc, from a disc to a coin, and the coin cools and yellows and steadies. And now it is only the sun, the ordinary sun, doing the ordinary thing it has done every day of your entire life without once being thanked for it. Keep coming. There is a blue world under it with water on the surface, actual liquid water, sitting there in the open, uncovered, unboiled. There is weather. There is a continent and a coastline and a town and a street and a roof and a room, and you are in it. And it is tonight, and you are lying down. That whole distance, and you crossed it in about a minute, going the wrong way up time. Here is what I want you to keep from the trip, and it is not the numbers, because the numbers were never yours to hold. It is this. The ending is not an event that gets announced. It is not a bell rung over everyone at once. There is no moment when all the lights in every window on every world go out together, and everybody who ever lived turns and looks at the same thing. The last night is private. It gets issued one sky at a time. Somewhere eventually some patch of matter has its own final evening and nobody else attends. Some other patch has it 1 trillion years later and never hears about the first one. Whatever is coming for the whole thing, it does not come for the whole thing in one stroke. It comes for each pocket separately, quietly, locally. The way an old house goes dark room by room while somebody walks through it turning things off, and the rooms do not know about each other. Yours is not tonight. That sounds small. It is not small. Yours is not tonight, and it is not tomorrow, and it is not in any span you could get your arms round if you spent your whole life trying. The distance between you and any of that is not a distance you're ever going to have to walk. You looked at it. That was allowed. Looking is free. But it does not have a claim on you, and it never did, and it was strange of it to try. And there is this, which is the part I like best. Right now, in this room, in the dark, on the skin of your arm, light is arriving. Not much. There is always some. It left something a while ago. Some of it left the sun 8 minutes ago and bounced around outside and found a way to you. Some of it left a star so long ago that the thing that sent it may not exist in the form that sent it anymore. It made the crossing anyway. It did not know where it was going. It did not know you would be here. And it got here, and it landed, and it is on you, and it is warm. And that is the whole transaction. Nothing is owed. It is the same warmth still held under a blanket by a hand that has not moved in an hour. Nobody put it there on purpose. It stayed anyway. You do not have to be the last observer. You do not have to be a reliable one. You do not have to be around for the ending to have been worth turning up for. You only have to be here, now, warm, in a room, under a sky that still has things in it, while the light that left something long ago finishes its trip on the back of your hand. That might be all any of it ever meant. Let the rest of it go where it is going. It has time. You have tonight, and tonight is enough, and it is yours. Sleep well.